We're honored to have our co-chair of the IRF Summit, Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, to join us, offering some remarks. And Katrina has traveled to Taiwan with our, we have a power table of women, right, to support Taiwan, undefeatable. And Dr. Katrina Lantos also served as the president of the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. So let's welcome Katrina, Dr. Lantos.
It is such a pleasure for me to be here with you. I need to begin by paying tribute to Bob Fu, who is one of the most fearless warriors on behalf of democracy and freedom, and the many, many millions of people, tens and hundreds of millions of people in China who suffer under that brutal dictatorship. And I also want to acknowledge Nadine Mayenza, who was my sort of succeeded after I had left USURF. She joined USURF, served brilliantly as chair. I mean, I think she's viewed as one of the most serious and substantive and kind of get-it-done chairs that USURF ever had. And really, your name is sort of a legend out there, Nadine. So it's quite an honor to be here with you. I am not going to mince my words today, and I'm really only going to talk parenthetically, if you'll forgive me, about religious freedom. I want to talk about the precursor to religious freedom, which is the necessity for a democratic and a free society. Now, we know that Taiwan is in peril, and I don't think we should kid ourselves about it. I don't think we can afford to engage in happy talk or crossed fingers or hopeful thinking or wishing upon a star. We must look with clear-eyed sobriety at the risks that are posed to the independence and the religious freedom and the democratic practices and the rule of law that currently prevail in Taiwan, but would be crushed, as we know, if it were to be taken over by China. It's just a fact. All those optimists who some now 20 plus years ago, when the treaty was signed, granting China sovereignty over Hong Kong, in which Great Britain relinquished their sovereignty over Hong Kong, many promises were made, many hopes were expressed. And yet, if you look at what has happened to Hong Kong today, that once vibrant outpost of democracy, of pluralism, of religious freedom, of economic vitality, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, it has been crushed. It has absolutely been crushed. And if there is one lesson we need to take from what happened to Hong Kong, it is that it is much harder to roll back this kind of repression than to stop it in the first place. We do not want to be fighting a rearguard action on the back end when it comes to Taiwan, because I hate to say it, but I'm not sure we have the political will to fight those rearguard actions once the war has started, once the occupation has started, once the national security law has been passed, once the democracy movement has been crushed. Now, obviously, all of this has been underscored and made much more dramatic by events in Ukraine. And Ukraine is obviously a terrible situation. It's an outrageous situation, an unprovoked war against a sovereign country. But Ukraine has been a very clarifying moment in some ways for the world. And I hope that it has been and will even more so be a clarifying moment for China. So it has sort of ripped the mask off of China's efforts to portray itself as kind of neither here nor there, and its constant doublespeak in which it attempts to suggest that it is a legitimate part of kind of the community of nations. But with their decision to back Russia in this unprovoked war against Ukraine, they have clearly helped divide the world again, if you will, into the free world and those who support dictatorship and oppression. I think China is taking very careful note of what happens in Ukraine. They are taking careful note of the pretty serious, but I hope soon to be even more serious, sanctions and economic isolation that has been imposed on Russia. Now, dozens of major Western corporations have left or are in the process of leaving Russia. Obviously, we have a range of sanctions. We still have not fully implemented truly effective sanctions on the sale of Russian oil, but I hope that that will be coming. China, I think, is noting with great care the dramatic infusion of the most sophisticated weaponry into Ukraine, and the recent commitment by the G7 countries that they are in this till the end with Ukraine. I think China has also noted what surprised a lot of people, and that was the Ukrainians were ready to fight. They were ready to fight for their freedom and to fight for their independence and to fight for their country. You know, often we can avoid fighting in this world if we know ahead of time what we're ready to fight for. And I believe that the people of Taiwan would be ready to fight for what they have built, a prosperous, democratic, pluralistic, rights-respecting rule of law society. And they are not, as the Russians thought would be the case with Ukraine, basically few days, roll in, decapitate the government, turn it into a vassal state, all done. There'll be a little bit of high-minded, hot rhetoric about how this shall not stand, but it would stand, and the world would move on. So Ukraine has scrambled the narrative, and I think it has scrambled the narrative in a way that I believe is very, very important to the future of Taiwan. But what must happen now, and of course this all does tie back to religious freedom, so forgive me for giving what sounds like a much more political set of remarks, but I think it is intimately connected. Because you look to China, there is no freedom of religion, conscience, and belief in China. None at all. It is absolutely crushed. From the Uyghurs to the Tibetans to the house church movement to all of the Christian world in China to the Falun Gong, you name it. Any community that places their faith above their fealty, if you will, to the state is a threat to the Chinese Communist government. They know that. And so if Taiwan is not defended, religious freedom will also be crushed there. So these are intimately connected. I would encourage all of you in whatever way you can, in whatever opportunities you have, to raise your voices, to begin a drumbeat of lobbying and pressure on all of our leaders in Washington to say that Ukraine is a warning and we must heed the warning. Shame on us if we don't. There will be no excuse if we do not make it abundantly clear before something happens to China that the consequences will be disastrous and unimaginable, and that everything that China has sought to build now over the last, more than half century will be at risk, that there will be an economic isolation and a cutting off of China's ability to interact with the rest of the world. These are harsh words, and I know China is a proud country and a belligerent government that doesn't like being confronted. But that is what is required. China is also a bully. It is a bully in its region of the world. And bullies need somebody to stand up to them. And usually, when somebody with a little heft of their own stands up to the bully thinks twice. And the bully says, well, maybe this isn't in our interest. Maybe that aspiration we have to crush and occupy and take advantage of all of the wealth and achievements of Taiwan, maybe it's not worth the price we'd have to pay. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to a very cold-hearted calculation with these kinds of regimes. Is the price too high? If the price is too high, they will back down. If the price isn't high enough, they'll take a chance and try to expand their reach and their oppressive rule. So I'm very delighted because my youngest daughter just arrived to spend the last little bit of the summit with me, but she's also sort of my minder now, and she's pointing to her watch because I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave you. Thank you for the opportunity, Bob, to join you. I do apologize in a way for the sternness of my message today, but I feel it very strongly. I love Taiwan. I had the opportunity to be there with these wonderful gentlemen. I saw the spirit of the people of Taiwan, and we owe it to our honor, and we owe it to our friends, and we owe it to the world. We owe it to our commitment to religious freedom and democracy and human rights to stand by Taiwan, to strengthen Taiwan, and to send an unambiguous message to China. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you.